All right, so today we're going to deep dive into something pretty important, prepping for a competition policy officer interview.
Absolutely.
Yeah, these are the folks who make sure that the marketplace is a level playing field, right?
Yeah.
That big companies don't squash the little guys and that consumers get a fair shake.
It's right.
Think of them as the referees of the business world, making sure everyone's playing by the rules. And we're going beyond just your, generic interview tips here.
Yeah.
We're going to be dissecting actual sample interview questions taken from RoleCatcher's resources.
Excellent resources.
It's like having a cheat sheet for career success.
It's true. RoleCatcher provides a treasure trove of resources, detailed career guides, a whole bank of interview questions, even AI-powered tools to help you fine-tune your answers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we're going to be blending all those resources today to give you the ultimate interview prep experience.
So, okay, let's unpack this a little bit more. We've got three main sources we're looking at today: a career guide, an interview guide, and information about RoleCatcher itself.
Oh.
And here's a fascinating tidbit. 82% of the core abilities for this role revolve around judgment and decision-making.
That's right.
That's huge.
It is.
So we're going to be exploring what that means for you and how to show off those skills in your answers.
Sounds good.
Okay, so where do we start? I guess we start with the career guide, which really emphasizes that competition policy officers are essentially the guardians of fair play in the marketplace, right? They develop and implement policies, they analyze market trends, and they ensure that businesses comply with laws and regulations.
All of that.
It's a big job.
It is. Think of them as economic detectives, constantly on the lookout for any unfair practices,
Right?
striving to keep the market healthy and competitive.
That's a pretty important job.
Sorry.
So how do you convince an interviewer that you're up to the task?
That's a good question.
Well, that's where those sample interview questions come in.
Okay.
Let's dive into the interview guide and tackle them one by one. Okay, so the first one is, what inspired you to pursue a career in competition policy?
Okay.
Now, that seems straightforward enough.
Yeah.
But what are they really trying to get at here?
What they're looking for is something beyond the textbook definition,
Mm-hmm.
They want to know what drives you personally, what sparks your passion for promoting fair competition.
Okay.
So you really want to think back to your own experiences, maybe. Was there ever a time when you saw an instance of unfair market practices and thought, this isn't right?
Right.
Or perhaps you were inspired by a particular policy change that made a real difference for consumers?
Okay.
You really want to share that spark, that personal connection to the field.
So it's about showing your genuine interest and connecting it to your experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's say you nail that part.
Okay.
What kind of follow-up questions should you be ready for?
Well, they might ask you to elaborate on a specific experience that you mentioned,
Right.
And delve into maybe the specifics of what you learned from that experience or how it shaped your perspective.
Okay.
They might also ask you to link your motivation to the specific goals of the organization that you're interviewing with.
That makes sense.
Yeah, showing that alignment is key.
So how do you craft a response that kind of hits all the right notes?
I think authenticity and enthusiasm are your superpowers here.
Okay.
Really share your genuine interest, highlight your relevant skills, and even mention specific areas of competition policy that you find fascinating.
Okay.
So, for example, if you're really intrigued by the intersection of competition and digital markets, mention that.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it shows you've really thought about this career path.
Okay. Next question.
Mm-hmm.
How do you stay up to date with developments in competition policy?
Okay.
So what are we highlighting in our response for this?
You want to show that you're doing more than just, skimming headlines.
Right.
They want to see that you have a genuine commitment to continuous learning.
Go.
So you could talk about, specific journals or publications that you follow, conferences that you attend, thought leaders in the field that you admire. For instance, you could mention that you follow the Competition Policy International Journal, or that you attend the annual Antitrust Enforcement Symposium.
Right. So name-dropping some key resources shows that you're really plugged into the field.
Exactly.
What kind of follow-up questions could come from that?
They might ask you to share a recent development that caught your eye,
Okay.
maybe a groundbreaking case or a new regulation, and how you would apply that knowledge to your work.
So testing if you can connect theory and practice.
Exactly.
Okay, onto a more technical question. How do you approach analyzing a complex competition issue?
Okay.
What's the secret sauce for answering this one?
I think you should think of it as a recipe.
Okay.
What are the key ingredients that you use for tackling a complex problem?
Right.
Maybe you start by, gathering data from market research reports, regulatory filings, industry news.
Mm-hmm.
You then identify the key players, analyze their motivations, and assess their potential impact on competition.
Right.
Really lay out your process step by step.
So it's like piecing together a puzzle.
Exactly.
Right? You're gathering all these different bits of information to form a complete picture.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of piecing things together,
Yeah.
this is where RoleCatcher's AI features can really come in handy.
Absolutely.
Tell me more about that.
So their AI analyzes job descriptions and suggests ways to make your CV or resume stand out.
Oh, wow.
It's pretty cool. Plus, they have an AI-powered interview prep tool that offers feedback on your answers.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, and that helps you refine your delivery and project confidence.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
It's like having a personal interview coach in your pocket.
That's right.
And all this prep work leads to a really rewarding career.
Hopefully.
The career guide highlights the high growth potential of this field.
Mm-hmm.
It's intellectually stimulating, and it offers a chance to make a real impact on the market.
And speaking of career progression,
Yeah.
did you know that this field offers a variety of specializations?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
You could focus on things like mergers and acquisitions or antitrust investigations.
Okay.
Or even sector-specific regulation.
Oh, that's what I call options.
That's right.
Okay, back to the hot seat.
All right.
Let's look at the next question. How do you balance the needs of businesses and consumers in your work?
Okay.
Now, this feels like a potential minefield.
It can be. It's a balancing act for sure.
Yeah, what's the best way to navigate this?
Well, they're trying to gauge your judgment and decision-making skills here.
Mm-hmm.
You want to start by acknowledging that competition policy is all about creating a fair playing field.
Right.
While you consider the interests of businesses, your ultimate goal is to protect consumer welfare.
Right.
It's about finding solutions that benefit the entire market ecosystem.
So it's not about picking sides, but finding that sweet spot where everyone benefits in the long run.
Exactly.
What kind of follow-up questions could they ask to taint that understanding?
They might ask you to describe a specific situation where you had to weigh those competing interests. Yeah. Maybe even a time when those interests were directly at odds.
Right.
They could even present a hypothetical scenario
Okay.
and see how you would approach resolving the conflict.
So it's all about showing your ability to navigate those tricky gray areas where there's no easy answer.
Exactly.
And remember, with RoleCatcher,
Yeah.
you can practice answering these complex questions and get feedback on your approach.
That's right.
Their AI can really help you refine that decision-making process. Consider those multiple perspectives
Mm-hmm.
and articulate your reasoning clearly.
That's very important.
All right, on to the next question. How do you ensure compliance with competition laws and regulations?
Oh.
This one seems like it's all about knowing the rules of the game inside and out, right?
It is, but it's also about demonstrating that you're proactive and diligent in upholding those rules.
Okay.
They want to see that you take compliance seriously and that you have strategies in place to ensure that businesses are playing by the book.
Right.
So you can talk about things like developing compliance programs, conducting audits, and working with businesses to address any potential violations.
So you're not just a rule book, but also a coach,
Exactly.
helping businesses understand and follow those rules while also holding them accountable.
That's right.
What kind of follow-up questions might come from that?
They could ask you to describe a specific compliance issue that you encountered and how you tackled it.
Okay.
Or they might even ask you to outline a compliance program for a particular industry,
Right.
testing your ability to apply those principles in a practical setting.
Okay, so you're showcasing both your knowledge and your experience.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of experience, let's pivot for a moment and talk about career progression.
Okay.
The career guide lays out different career stages: entry-level, junior, senior, all the way up to chief competition policy officer.
That's right.
It's quite a journey.
It is. And RoleCatcher dives even deeper into each of these stages,
Okay.
providing insights into the skills and experiences you'll need at each level.
Okay, back to the interview prep. Let's tackle a question that requires some serious finesse.
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe a time when you had to navigate a complex political landscape to achieve a competition policy objective?
All right.
This sounds like it requires some serious diplomacy skills.
It does.
What's the key here?
It's all about your political savvy and your consensus building skills.
Okay.
Choose a real-life example that demonstrates your ability to handle a tricky political situation.
Okay.
For instance, you could talk about a time you had to work with various government agencies, each with their own agenda to implement a new competition policy.
Okay.
Explain the challenges the stakeholders involved
Right.
and the strategies you use to reach your goal.
So it's about telling a story that highlights your strategic thinking and communication skills.
Exactly.
Okay, let's dive into another question that assesses your judgment. Can you describe a time when you had to make a difficult decision regarding competition policy?
Oh, okay.
What do they want to hear?
They want to see your critical thinking skills in action. So choose an example where you faced a decision with significant implications.
Okay.
Lay out the situation, the challenges, and the various options that you considered, and then walk them through your decision-making process. What factors did you weigh?
Right.
What was your rationale? And
Yeah.
what were the potential downsides of that decision?
So it's not just about the decision itself, but about demonstrating a thoughtful and well-reasoned process.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to admit that there might not have been a perfect solution.
Right.
Sometimes it's all about choosing the best option from a set of imperfect choices.
Okay. And what kind of follow-up questions should we be prepared for?
They might ask about the consequences of your decision, both positive and negative.
Okay.
Or they might inquire about feedback that you received from stakeholders and whether you would approach the situation differently in hindsight.
So it's about showing that you're reflective and willing to learn from your experiences, even the tough ones.
Yep.
Now let's shift gears again and talk about how RoleCatcher's AI can help you shine in these challenging questions.
Okay.
What can you tell me?
So RoleCatcher's AI can actually provide feedback on how clearly you articulate your decision-making process.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it can also help you identify any potential blind spots or areas where you can strengthen your reasoning.
Okay.
Remember, this tool is designed to help you present yourself as a confident and capable decision maker.
Okay, on to the next question. How do you collaborate with other government agencies and regulatory bodies to promote competition policy?
All right.
This seems like it's all about teamwork and building bridges, right?
Exactly. Competition policy often involves working across different agencies and jurisdictions. They want to know if you're a team player and a skilled collaborator.
Okay.
Think back to your own experiences. Did you participate in any joint task forces?
Okay.
Or contribute to interagency working groups? You really want to highlight those instances where you collaborated with others to achieve a shared goal related to competition policy.
So it's about demonstrating your ability to work effectively within that larger ecosystem, recognizing that competition policy often requires a multi-pronged approach.
Absolutely.
What kind of follow-up questions could they ask to probe your collaborative skills?
They might ask about the specific roles and responsibilities of the different agencies that were involved.
Okay.
Or they could ask about challenges you faced in coordinating with other agencies. Or even how you handled any conflicts or disagreements that might have arisen.
Right. So they're looking for those real-world examples of how you navigate the complexities of interagency collaboration.
Exactly.
So it's about showing that you can be both a leader and a team player, understanding the value of those diverse perspectives,
Right.
and ultimately working towards a common goal.
Exactly.
Now let's switch gears again and look at how RoleCatcher can help you nail these collaborative questions.
Okay.
What can they do?
Their AI can actually analyze your answers and highlight areas where you can strengthen your descriptions of teamwork and collaboration. It can help you identify specific examples that demonstrate your ability to build consensus, communicate effectively, and navigate potential conflicts within a team setting.
That's fantastic. It's like having a personal PR team,
Kind of.
helping you showcase your best collaborative self.
Yeah.
Okay, on to the next question. How do you ensure that your work is aligned with the broader goals and objectives of your organization?
All right.
This one seems like it's all about seeing the big picture and aligning your individual efforts with the overall mission.
You hit the nail on the head.
Right.
They want to see if you're strategic and forward-thinking, able to connect your individual tasks to the organization's larger goals.
Okay, so how do we show that we're not just working in a silo?
I think you should start by demonstrating your understanding of the organization's mission and priorities.
Okay.
So, for example, if the organization really emphasizes consumer protection, you could highlight how your work contributes to that goal by ensuring fair competition in the market.
Right. So it's about showing that you're aware of how your role contributes to the organization's success.
Exactly.
What kind of follow-up questions could they ask to dig deeper into this?
They might ask you to describe a project where you had to adjust your approach to align with maybe shifting organizational priorities. Or they could even ask about how you communicate the impact of your work to senior leadership, demonstrating your ability to connect your efforts to tangible organizational outcomes.
Okay, one last question for this part. How do you measure the effectiveness of your competition policy initiatives.
All right.
This feels like it's all about showing that you're data-driven and results-oriented.
You're absolutely right. They want to see that you're not just implementing policies, but
Right.
you're also tracking their impact
Right.
and using data to measure their effectiveness.
Okay, so how do we approach this one?
Talk about specific metrics that you use.
Okay.
Do you track changes in market concentration? Do you monitor consumer prices to see if they're becoming more competitive? You really want to use data to tell a story about the impact of your work.
So it's about showing that you're measuring the results and using data to back up your claims.
Exactly.
Okay, and what kind of follow-up questions should we be prepared for?
They might ask you to describe an initiative where you use data to demonstrate its effectiveness.
Okay.
Or they could ask about the challenges you faced in gathering data and measuring impact, particularly in complex or rapidly changing markets.
Right, so it's about being prepared to discuss both the successes and the challenges of data-driven decision-making.
Absolutely.
Okay, before we dive into the next set of questions,
Yes.
let's take a quick breather and revisit how RoleCatcher can help you refine your answers to these data-driven questions.
Okay.
What can they do?
Their AI can actually help you highlight your analytical skills
Okay.
and your ability to use data to support your claims. It can also help you identify areas where you can strengthen your descriptions of how you gather, analyze, and interpret data.
That's fantastic. It's like having a personal data analyst
Kind of.
helping you craft that perfect data-driven narrative.
That's right.
All right, we'll be back soon with more insightful questions and advice in part 2 of this deep dive, so don't go anywhere.
Sounds good. Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of competition policy officer interviews. We've already tackled some challenging questions, but we're just getting warmed up.
Exactly. And we're about to dissect another round of questions that'll help you stand out from the crowd.
All right.
So are you ready for the next challenge?
Absolutely. Bring it on. I'm eager to see what other insights we can uncover together.
Okay, let's jump right in. Next question. Can you describe a time when you had to present a complex competition policy issue to a non-expert audience?
Okay.
This one feels like it's all about communication and the art of simplification.
You're spot on. Competition policy can be quite technical and full of jargon.
Mm-hmm.
This question is all about your ability to break down those complexities and make them clear and engaging for someone who isn't steeped in the field.
Okay, so how do we show that we can be effective communicators?
Think back to a time when you had to explain a complex competition issue to someone outside the field.
Okay.
Maybe you had to present to a community group about the potential impact of a merger.
Mm-hmm.
Or perhaps you had to explain a new regulation to a group of small business owners.
Okay.
Share that experience and highlight the strategies you use to make the information digestible and relatable.
So it's about tailoring our message to our audience, right?
Exactly.
Using plain language, avoiding jargon, and maybe even using analogies or real-world examples to illustrate our points.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of follow-up questions could come from that?
They might ask about the feedback you received from your audience and whether you had to adjust your presentation based on their reactions.
Okay.
They might also ask how you measure the effectiveness of your communication.
Right.
Did the audience understand the key takeaways?
Okay.
Did they feel informed and engaged?
So it's about showing that you're not just talking at people, but that you're truly connecting with them and ensuring that they understand the information.
Exactly. And remember, effective communication is a crucial skill for competition policy officers.
Right.
They often have to explain complex issues to a wide range of stakeholders, including businesses, government officials, and the general public.
Okay, let's move on to a question that tests our investigative skills.
Yeah.
How would you approach investigating a potential abuse of dominance case?
Okay.
This feels like stepping into the shoes of an economic detective.
Absolutely. They're looking to see if you can gather evidence, analyze data, and apply legal principles to reach a well-founded conclusion.
Right.
Imagine you're investigating a tech giant that's suspected of using its market power to stifle competition. How would you approach that?
Well, I guess I'd start by gathering information about the market,
Okay.
the company's behavior, and any potential harm to competitors or consumers.
Mm-hmm.
I'd probably look at market share data pricing trends and any complaints or legal challenges against the company.
That's a good start.
Okay.
You could also mention the specific tools and techniques you'd use.
Yeah.
Things like market research, data analysis, and interviews with industry experts or competitors.
Yeah.
Remember, it's about demonstrating your ability to conduct a thorough and objective investigation.
Okay, what kind of follow-up questions might they ask to test our knowledge of abuse of dominance cases?
They might ask you to describe a specific case that you're familiar with.
Okay.
Maybe a landmark antitrust case that set a precedent in your jurisdiction.
Right.
Or they could present a hypothetical scenario and ask how you would apply the legal framework to that situation.
So it's about showing that we understand both the theory and the practice of antitrust enforcement.
Exactly.
And speaking of theory and practice,
Okay.
let's take a quick detour and talk about how RoleCatcher can help you bridge that gap.
Okay.
What can it do?
RoleCatcher's AI can be an invaluable tool for practicing your investigative approach and refining your explanations of complex legal concepts.
Okay.
It can provide feedback on how clearly you articulate your thought process and how effectively you apply legal principles to specific scenarios.
That's a fantastic resource. It's like having a legal expert in your pocket ready to guide you through the intricacies of antitrust law.
It is.
All right, let's get back to those interview questions.
Okay.
The next one is, how do you stay informed about changes in market dynamics and industry trends that could affect competition policy?
All right.
What are your thoughts on this one?
This question is all about demonstrating your proactive approach and your commitment to staying ahead of the curve.
Okay.
Think beyond just reading industry news.
Right.
What specific resources do you rely on to stay informed?
Okay.
Do you follow industry blogs or newsletters? Do you attend conferences or webinars that focus on emerging trends in competition policy?
Okay, so it's about showcasing your curiosity and your dedication to continuous learning.
Exactly.
What kind of follow-up questions could come from this?
They might ask you to share a recent market trend or industry development that you've been following and explain its potential implications for competition policy. Okay.
Or they could even ask you to identify a potential emerging issue
Okay.
and outline your approach to addressing it.
So they're testing your ability to think critically and anticipate future challenges.
Exactly.
So it's about being a thought leader, not just a follower, right? Always looking ahead and thinking about how those changes might shape the future of competition policy.
That's right. And remember, the world of competition policy is constantly evolving. So demonstrating your ability to stay ahead of the curve is essential.
Okay, next question. Can you describe a time when you had to work effectively under pressure to meet a tight deadline?
Okay.
This feels like a classic interview question, but it's still a crucial one.
Is.
What's the key to answering this effectively?
It's all about showcasing your ability to handle stress, prioritize tasks, and deliver results even when the clock is ticking.
Okay.
Choose a specific example that demonstrates your resilience and problem-solving skills.
For instance, you could talk about a time when you had to analyze a complex merger case under a very tight deadline. Or maybe you had to prepare a briefing document for a high-level meeting with limited time to spare.
So it's about telling a story that highlights our ability to stay calm under pressure. Right?
Success.
And to demonstrate that we can still produce high-quality work even when faced with those tight deadlines.
That's right.
What kind of follow-up questions might they ask to probe our ability to handle pressure?
They might ask you to describe a time when you didn't meet a deadline.
Yeah.
What you learned from that experience or how you've improved your time management skills since then.
Right. So they're looking for honesty and self-awareness, as well as that commitment to continuous improvement.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's move on to a question that tests our interpersonal skills. How would you approach engaging with stakeholders who have different perspectives on a competition policy issue?
Okay.
This feels like it's all about diplomacy and the art of building consensus, right?
Absolutely. Competition policy often involves working with a diverse range of stakeholders, including businesses, consumer groups, government agencies, and international organizations.
Right.
It's rare that everyone will see eye to eye.
Yeah.
So it's crucial to be able to navigate those differences and find common ground.
So how do we demonstrate that we can handle those potentially challenging conversations?
Think about a time when you had to work with stakeholders who had differing viewpoints.
Okay.
Maybe you were involved in a public consultation on a proposed policy change, or perhaps you had to mediate a dispute between two businesses.
Okay.
Share that experience and highlight the strategies you use to build relationships. Listen actively and find solutions that address the concerns of all parties involved.
So it's about showcasing our ability to be empathetic listeners, skilled communicators, and effective negotiators.
Yeah, exactly. And remember, successful stakeholder engagement is all about finding that sweet spot where everyone feels heard and respected, even if they don't agree on every issue.
Okay, let's shift gears for a moment and talk about how RoleCatcher can help you shine in these stakeholder engagement questions.
Okay.
What can their AI do?
So their AI can actually analyze your answers and highlight areas where you can strengthen your descriptions of your communication and negotiation skills.
Okay.
It can also help you identify specific examples that demonstrate your ability to build consensus-resolve conflicts and find win-win solutions.
That's incredibly helpful. It's like having a personal diplomacy coach,
Kinda.
helping you navigate the complexities of stakeholder engagement.
Yeah.
All right, let's get back to those interview questions. The next one is, how do you stay abreast of developments in international competition law and policy?
Okay.
What are we highlighting in our response?
This question is all about demonstrating your global perspective and your understanding of the interconnected nature of competition policy.
Okay.
They want to know if you're aware of the latest trends and developments in other jurisdictions
Right.
and how those developments might impact your work.
Okay, so how do we showcase our international awareness?
Think about the specific sources you rely on to stay informed about international competition law and policy.
Right.
Do you follow international organizations like the OECD or the ICN?
Okay.
Do you read journals or publications that focus on global antitrust developments?
Mm-hmm.
Do you attend international conferences or webinars?
Okay, so it's about showing that we're not just focused on our own little corner of the world,
Right.
but that we're actively engaging with the global competition policy community.
Exactly.
What kind of follow-up questions could come from this?
They might ask you to describe a specific international development that you've been following
Mm-hmm.
and explain its potential implications for your jurisdiction.
Okay.
Or they could ask you to compare and contrast the competition policy regimes of different countries or regions,
Okay.
highlighting the key similarities and differences in their approaches.
So it's about demonstrating our ability to think globally and to understand how competition policy is evolving on a global scale.
Mm.
And speaking of evolving, let's take a quick detour and talk about career progression within this field.
Right.
The Career Guide highlights that a career as a competition policy officer can take you in many different directions.
It's true. As you gain experience, you might choose to specialize in a particular area,
Okay.
such as merger control, antitrust enforcement, or competition advocacy.
Mm-hmm.
You could also move into leadership roles within your organization or even explore opportunities in international organizations or the private sector.
Now that we've taken a peek into the future, let's get back to those interview questions.
Okay.
The next one is, can you describe a time when you had to make a presentation or deliver a training session on a competition policy topic?
All right.
This feels like it's all about showcasing our communication skills and our ability to share our knowledge with others.
You're exactly right. Competition policy professionals often need to educate others about the complexities of this field.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's presenting to senior leadership training colleagues or conducting outreach to businesses or consumer groups, they want to see if you can effectively convey information, engage your audience, and make complex concepts understandable and relevant.
So how do we demonstrate our ability to be effective communicators and trainers?
Think back to a time when you had to present or deliver training on a competition policy topic.
Okay.
Maybe you had to explain a new regulation to a group of business executives. Or perhaps you had to train a group of new recruits on the basics of competition law.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. We need to share a specific experience that highlights our ability to structure a presentation, engage our audience, and explain those complex concepts clearly and concisely.
Exactly.
What kind of follow-up questions might they ask to assess our presentation and training skills?
They might ask about the feedback you received from your audience or how you adjusted your approach based on their reactions.
Okay.
They might also ask you to describe the different training methods you've used.
Right.
Things like lectures, case studies, group discussions, or interactive exercises.
So it's all about showcasing our versatility as communicators and our ability to adapt our approach to different audiences and learning styles.
Absolutely. And remember, effective communication is essential for building trust and understanding among stakeholders,
Right.
which is crucial for promoting a culture of compliance with competition law.
Okay, let's move on to a question that tests our conflict resolution skills. How do you handle disagreements or conflicts with colleagues or superiors regarding competition policy decisions?
Okay.
This feels like a tricky one,
It can be.
as it involves navigating potentially sensitive interpersonal dynamics.
Yeah.
What's your advice for handling this question effectively?
You're absolutely right. Competition policy can be a contentious field, and disagreements are bound to arise from time to time.
Right.
This question is all about demonstrating your professionalism, your ability to handle conflict constructively,
Okay.
and your commitment to finding solutions that align with the principles of competition policy.
So how do we showcase our conflict resolution superpowers?
Think back to a time when you had a disagreement with a colleague or superior regarding a competition policy decision.
Okay.
Maybe you had different views on how to approach a particular case. Or perhaps you had conflicting interpretations of the relevant legal principles.
Okay, I'm starting to see a pattern here. We need to share a specific experience that highlights our ability to listen actively, communicate respectfully,
Yes.
and find common ground even when faced with those disagreements.
Exactly.
What kind of follow-up questions might they ask to assess our conflict resolution skills?
They might ask about the outcome of the disagreement.
Okay.
Were you able to reach a mutually agreeable solution? Or they might ask about the lessons you learned from the experience,
Right.
showcasing your ability to reflect on your actions and identify areas for improvement.
So it's all about demonstrating that we can handle conflict professionally,
Absolutely.
learn from our experiences, and ultimately contribute to a positive and productive work environment.
That's right. And remember, effective conflict resolution is essential for building strong relationships and fostering a collaborative culture within an organization.
All right, let's dive into a question that tests our understanding of the evolving landscape of competition policy. What are some of the key challenges facing competition policy in the digital age?
Okay.
This feels like a broad question,
It is.
but it's also an opportunity to demonstrate our awareness of the unique challenges posed by the digital economy. What are your thoughts?
You're spot on. The digital age has brought about rapid technological advancements, new business models, and evolving consumer behavior,
Right.
all of which have significant implications for competition policy.
Right.
They're looking for you to demonstrate your understanding of these challenges and your ability to think critically about how competition policy needs to adapt to the digital age.
So how do we showcase our awareness of the key issues?
Think about the specific challenges that are top of mind for competition authorities around the world.
Yeah.
For example, you could discuss the rise of platform markets and the challenges of regulating dominant digital platforms.
Right.
You could talk about the increasing importance of data and the implications for competition and privacy.
Okay.
You could even discuss the cross-border nature of digital markets and the challenges of international cooperation and enforcement.
So it's about demonstrating our understanding of the complexities of the digital economy
Yes.
and the unique challenges that it poses for competition policy.
Exactly.
What kind of follow-up questions might they ask to assess our understanding of these challenges?
They might ask you to elaborate on a specific challenge,
Okay.
such as the regulation of algorithms or the challenges of cross-border enforcement.
Right.
They could also ask you to discuss a specific case or example that illustrates one of these challenges,
Okay.
demonstrating your ability to connect theory to practice.
So it's about being prepared to go deeper into specific issues and provide concrete examples of how these challenges are playing out in the real world.
Exactly. And remember, the digital economy is constantly evolving. So demonstrating your ability to stay ahead of the curve and anticipate future challenges is essential.
Okay, let's move on to a question that tests our analytical rigor. How do you ensure that your competition policy recommendations are evidence-based and well-supported?
Okay.
This feels like it's all about showcasing our commitment to data-driven decision-making.
You're absolutely right. Competition policy decisions should be grounded in solid evidence and sound economic analysis. They want to see that you understand the importance of rigorous analysis.
Right.
And that you're committed to using data to support your recommendations.
So how do we demonstrate that we're data-driven and result-oriented?
Think about the specific steps you take to ensure that your recommendations are well supported.
Yeah.
Do you conduct thorough market research? Do you use economic models and statistical analysis to test your hypotheses?
Okay.
Do you consult with industry experts and gather a range of perspectives before making a recommendation?
So it's about highlighting our analytical toolkit and our commitment to using data to inform our decisions.
Exactly.
What kind of follow-up questions might they ask to assess our commitment to evidence-based decision-making?
They might ask you to describe a specific example where you use data and analysis to support a competition policy recommendation.
Oh, okay.
They could also ask about your experience using economic models or statistical software, or how you handle situations where the data is inconclusive or contradictory.
So it's all about showcasing our ability to think critically, analyze data effectively
Absolutely.
and draw sound conclusions based on the available evidence.
And remember, competition policy is a field that relies heavily on data and analysis.
Right.
So demonstrating your skills in these areas is essential.
Okay, let's tackle a question that requires a strategic mindset. How would you approach promoting competition in a sector that is dominated by a few large firms?
Okay.
This feels like a challenging task, as those large firms often have significant market power and influence.
You're absolutely right. Addressing concentrated markets is one of the core challenges of competition policy. They want to see if you understand the complexities of such markets and if you can develop innovative solutions to promote competition and benefit consumers.
So how do we showcase our strategic thinking and our ability to develop creative solutions?
Think about the different tools and approaches that competition authorities can use to promote competition in concentrated markets.
Okay.
You could discuss reducing barriers to entry for new competitors, encouraging innovation and technological disruption, or addressing anti-competitive practices by dominant firms.
Okay, so it's about demonstrating our understanding of the levers of competition policy.
Exactly.
And how they can be used to create a more level playing field.
That's right.
What kind of follow-up questions might they ask to assess our ability to promote competition in concentrated markets?
They might ask you to describe a specific example where you successfully promoted competition in a concentrated sector. Or they could present a hypothetical scenario and ask you to outline your approach.
So it's about being prepared to apply our knowledge and skills to real-world situations.
Absolutely. And remember, promoting competition in concentrated markets requires a multifaceted approach that involves a combination of regulatory interventions, market-based solutions, and advocacy efforts.
Okay, let's move on to a question that tests our commitment to ethical conduct. How do you handle confidential or sensitive information in your work as a competition policy officer?
Okay.
This feels like a crucial question,
It is.
as competition policy often involves access to highly sensitive business information.
You're absolutely right. Competition policy work often involves access to highly confidential and sensitive information, such as company financial data, strategic plans, or details of ongoing investigations. They want to see if you understand the importance of protecting that information and handling it with the utmost discretion and integrity.
So how do we demonstrate our trustworthiness and our commitment to upholding the highest ethical standards?
Think about the specific policies and procedures you follow to ensure confidentiality.
Okay.
Do you use secure storage for documents? Do you have restricted access to sensitive information?
Yep.
Do you sign non-disclosure agreements?
Right.
You really want to explain the steps you take to safeguard confidential information
Right.
and emphasize your understanding of the importance of data security and privacy.
Okay, so it's about showcasing our awareness of best practices for handling confidential information.
Exactly.
What kind of follow-up questions might they ask to assess our ability to handle confidential information?
They might ask you to describe a specific situation where you had to handle sensitive information and how you ensured its confidentiality.
Okay.
They could also ask you about the steps you would take if you suspected a breach of confidentiality,
Right.
demonstrating your ability to respond quickly and decisively to protect sensitive information.
So it's all about showing that we take confidentiality seriously
Absolutely.
and that we have the knowledge and skills to protect sensitive information and maintain the integrity of our work.
That's right. And remember, maintaining confidentiality is essential for building trust with stakeholders
Right.
and ensuring the effectiveness of competition policy enforcement.
Okay, let's move on to a question that tests our networking and relationship building skills. How would you approach building relationships with other competition policy professionals, both domestically and internationally?
Okay.
This feels like it's all about the importance of collaboration and knowledge sharing within the competition policy community.
You're absolutely right. Competition policy is a global field, and building relationships with other professionals can provide valuable insights, opportunities for collaboration, and access to a wider range of expertise.
Right.
They want to see if you're proactive and engaged in building those relationships, and if you understand the value of professional networking.
So how do we demonstrate our ability to build and maintain those relationships?
Think about the specific steps you take to connect with other competition policy professionals.
Okay.
Do you attend conferences and workshops? Do you participate in online forums or discussion groups?
Okay.
Do you reach out to colleagues in other jurisdictions to learn about their experiences and best practices?
So it's about showcasing our initiative and our commitment to building a professional network.
Exactly.
What kind of follow-up questions might they ask to assess our networking and relationship building skills.
They might ask you to describe a specific example of a professional relationship that you've built
Okay.
and how it has benefited your work.
Yeah.
They could also ask you to identify a specific competition policy professional that you admire and explain why.
Right, so demonstrating our awareness of key figures in the field.
Exactly.
So it's all about showing that we're not just working in isolation, but that we're actively engaging with a broader competition policy community and seeking out opportunities to learn from others and build collaborative relationships.
Exactly. And remember, collaboration and knowledge sharing are essential for promoting best practices and advancing the field of competition policy.
Okay, let's move on to a question that tests our communication skills and our ability to explain complex concepts clearly. How would you explain the concept of market definition to someone who is not familiar with competition policy?
Okay.
This feels like a challenging task, as market definition can be a bit technical and abstract.
You're absolutely right. Market definition is a fundamental concept in competition policy. But it can be challenging to explain to those who are not familiar with the field.
Right.
They want to see if you can break down this complex concept into clear, concise, and easily understandable terms.
So how do we demonstrate our ability to communicate effectively and make technical concepts accessible to non-experts?
Think about how you would explain market definition to a friend or family member who has no background in economics or law.
Okay.
Start by explaining the purpose of market definition. Why is it important in competition policy?
Okay.
Then explain the key factors that are considered when defining a market, such as the product or service in question, its geographic scope, and the potential substitutes that consumers might consider.
So it's about using plain language, avoiding jargon, and providing a clear and concise explanation of the key concepts.
Exactly.
What kind of follow-up questions might they ask to assess our ability to explain market definition?
They might ask you to provide a specific example of a market definition exercise, outlining the steps you took and the factors you considered. They could also ask you to explain how market definition can affect the outcome of a competition case,
Right.
demonstrating your understanding of the practical implications of this concept.
So it's all about showing that we can take a complex concept and make it accessible to a wider audience.
Exactly. And remember, effective communication is essential for building public understanding and support for competition policy.
Okay, let's move on to a question that tests our commitment to continuous learning. How do you stay up to date on the latest developments in economic theory and econometrics that are relevant to competition policy?
Okay.
This feels like it's all about demonstrating our intellectual curiosity and our dedication to staying at the forefront of our field.
You're absolutely right. Competition policy is a dynamic field, and it's essential to stay informed about the latest developments in economic theory and econometrics that can inform our work.
Right.
They want to see if you're intellectual curious, engaged in the academic literature, and actively seeking out new knowledge and tools that can enhance your analytical skills.
So how do we showcase our commitment to lifelong learning?
Think about the specific journals, publications, or online resources you use to stay up to date on the latest developments in economic theory and econometrics.
Okay.
Do you follow the work of leading academics in the field? Do you attend conferences or workshops that focus on cutting-edge research? Do you subscribe to journals that publish articles on econometric methods and their applications to competition policy?
So it's about demonstrating our engagement with the academic literature and our dedication to expanding our knowledge base.
Exactly.
What kind of follow-up questions might they ask to assess our commitment to continuous learning?
They might ask you to discuss a specific economic theory or econometric technique that you've recently learned about,
Okay.
and explain how it might be applied to competition policy. They could also ask you to identify a specific area of economic research that you find particularly interesting,
Right.
and explain why, demonstrating your intellectual curiosity and your passion for the field.
So it's all about showing that we're not content with just knowing what we know today, but that we're constantly seeking to learn and grow and stay at the cutting edge of our field.
Exactly. And remember, competition policy is a field that is constantly evolving.
Right.
So a commitment to lifelong learning is essential for staying relevant and making meaningful contributions to the field.
Okay, let's tackle a question that tests our ability to influence decision makers. How would you approach advocating for a competition policy change to senior leadership or policymakers?
Okay.
This feels like it's all about persuasion strategy and the ability to build a compelling case for our recommendations.
You're absolutely right. Competition policy professionals often need to advocate for policy changes, whether it's updating existing laws and regulations,
Right.
introducing new enforcement guidelines, or advocating for a particular approach to a specific case.
Right.
They want to see if you can effectively build a case, present your arguments persuasively, and influence decision makers.
So how do we demonstrate our ability to be effective advocates for competition policy?
Think about the different strategies you might use to advocate for a policy change.
Yeah.
Who are the key decision makers? What are their priorities and concerns?
Okay.
What evidence would be most persuasive to them?
Right.
How can you frame your arguments in a way that resonates with their values and goals?
So it's about being strategic and persuasive in our communication, understanding our audience, and tailoring our message accordingly.
Exactly.
What kind of follow-up questions might they ask to assess our advocacy skills?
They might ask you to describe a specific example where you successfully advocated for a competition policy change,
Okay.
highlighting the challenges you faced and the strategies you used to overcome them.
Yeah.
They could also ask you to outline your approach to building a case for a hypothetical policy change,
Okay.
identifying the key arguments, the supporting evidence, and the potential challenges you might face.
So it's all about demonstrating our ability to think strategically, communicate effectively,
Absolutely.
and navigate complex political environments.
And remember, effective advocacy requires a combination of analytical rigor, persuasive communication, and a deep understanding of the policymaking process.
Okay, let's move on to a question that tests our ability to balance competing priorities. How do you balance the need for rigorous economic analysis with the need to make timely decisions in fast-moving markets?
Okay.
This feels like a tricky balancing act,
It can be.
as we need to be both thorough and efficient in our work.
Yes.
What's your advice for handling this question effectively?
You're absolutely right. Competition policy often involves making decisions in dynamic and fast-moving markets, where delays can have significant consequences.
Right.
At the same time, those decisions should be grounded in sound economic analysis to ensure that they are well-informed and likely to achieve their intended objectives.
Right.
They want to see if you understand that tension and can find the right balance between speed and rigor.
So how do we demonstrate our ability to make sound judgments and prioritize effectively even under pressure?
Think about the strategies you use to manage your time effectively
Right.
and make strategic decisions about where to focus your efforts. Do you set clear priorities and deadlines?
Okay.
Do you use efficient analytical tools and techniques? Do you delegate tasks effectively and seek input from others when needed?
Okay, so it's about showcasing our ability to manage our time effectively and make strategic decisions about where to focus our efforts. What kind of follow-up questions might they ask to assess our ability to balance speed and rigor in our decision-making?
They might ask you to describe a specific example where you had to make a difficult trade-off between thoroughness and speed, explaining the factors you considered and the rationale for your decision. They could also ask about your experience using analytical tools or techniques that can help expedite the decision-making process without sacrificing rigor.
So it's all about demonstrating that we can adapt our approach to the specific circumstances of each case, finding the right balance between speed and rigor to ensure that our decisions are both timely and well-informed.
Exactly. And remember, effective decision-making in competition policy requires a combination of analytical skills, practical judgment, and a deep understanding of the dynamics of fast-moving markets.
Okay, let's tackle a question that tests our ability to be proactive and influential in shaping the competitive landscape. How would you approach developing a competition advocacy strategy to promote competition in a specific sector? This feels like it's all about being strategic, persuasive, and result-oriented. What are your thoughts?
You're absolutely right. Competition advocacy is a key function of competition authorities, and it involves identifying and addressing structural or regulatory barriers to competition, promoting pro-competitive policies, and raising awareness about the benefits of competition. They want to see if you understand the role of competition advocacy and can develop effective strategies to promote competition in specific sectors.
So how do we showcase our ability to think strategically and develop targeted interventions to improve market outcomes?
Think about the different steps involved in developing a competition advocacy strategy. First, you need to identify the key barriers to competition in the sector in question. Are there regulatory hurdles that are stifling innovation? Are there anti-competitive practices that are harming consumers? Once you've identified the key issues, you can develop a strategy to address them.
Okay, so it's about demonstrating our analytical skills and our ability to identify the root causes of competition problems. Then what?
Then you need to think about the specific tools and approaches that competition authorities can use to address those barriers. Can you advocate for regulatory changes? Can you promote industry best practices? Can you conduct market studies to raise awareness about competition issues?
So it's about showcasing our understanding of the tools and approaches available to competition authorities. What kind of follow-up questions might they ask to assess our ability to develop effective competition advocacy strategies?
They might ask you to describe a specific example where you successfully developed and implemented a competition advocacy strategy, outlining the challenges you faced and the outcomes you achieved. They could also ask you to identify a specific sector that you believe would benefit from competition advocacy and explain your rationale.
It's all about being prepared to discuss specific cases and demonstrate our ability to apply our knowledge and skills to real-world situations.
Exactly. And remember, effective competition advocacy requires a deep understanding of the sector in question, the regulatory environment, and the tools of competition advocacy.
All right, let's move on to a question that tests our ability to analyze complex transactions. How would you assess the competitive effects of a proposed merger or acquisition? This feels like it's all about our ability to apply economic principles to real-world business decisions. What are your thoughts?
You're absolutely right. Merger control is a core function of competition authorities, and it involves assessing the potential competitive effects of proposed mergers and acquisitions to ensure that they do not substantially lessen competition. They want to see if you understand the framework for merger review and can apply it to real-world scenarios.
So how do we demonstrate our analytical skills and our ability to apply economic principles to the assessment of mergers and acquisitions?
Think about the key steps involved in merger review. First, you need to define the relevant market. What products or services are involved? What is the geographic scope of the market? Once you've defined the market, you can assess the market shares of the merging parties. How much market power will the merged entity have?
Okay, so it's about showcasing our understanding of the basic principles of merger analysis. What comes next?
Then you need to consider the potential competitive effects of the merger. Will the merger lead to higher prices? Will it reduce innovation? Will it diminish consumer choice?
So it's about demonstrating our ability to analyze the potential impact of a merger on competition and consumer welfare. What kind of follow-up questions might they ask to assess our ability to assess the competitive effects of mergers?
They might ask you to describe a specific merger case that you're familiar with, outlining the key issues and the outcome of the review. They could also ask you to apply the merger review framework to a hypothetical scenario, explaining the factors you would consider and the potential remedies you might recommend.
It's all about being prepared to discuss both theoretical concepts and real-world applications.
Exactly. And remember, effective merger review requires a combination of economic analysis, legal expertise, and a deep understanding of the industry in question.
Okay, let's move on to a question that tests our investigative skills and our ability to build a compelling legal case. How would you approach building a case to challenge an anti-competitive agreement or practice? This feels like it's all about showcasing our ability to be economic detectives and legal strategists. What are your thoughts?
You're absolutely right. Challenging anti-competitive agreements and practices is a core function of competition authorities, and it involves gathering evidence, analyzing market data, and presenting a strong legal case to demonstrate a violation of competition law. They want to see if you understand the legal framework for antitrust enforcement and can effectively build a case to challenge anti-competitive conduct.
So how do we showcase our ability to conduct thorough investigations, analyze evidence, and present persuasive arguments?
Think about the different steps involved in building a case. First, you need to identify the potential violation of competition law. What specific agreement or practice is at issue? How does it harm competition? Once you've identified the potential violation you need to gather evidence to support your case, what kind of evidence would be most persuasive?
Okay, so it's about demonstrating our understanding of the evidentiary standards and the legal framework for antitrust enforcement. What comes next?
Then, you need to develop a strong legal theory. What specific legal tests or criteria will you use to prove your case? How will you anticipate and address potential defenses from the parties involved?
So it's about showcasing our ability to think strategically and build a compelling legal argument. What kind of follow-up questions might they ask to assess our ability to build antitrust cases?
They might ask you to describe a specific antitrust case that you're familiar with, outlining the key evidence and the outcome of the case. They could also ask you to apply the antitrust framework to a hypothetical scenario, explaining the evidence you would gather and the arguments you would make.
It's all about being prepared to discuss both theoretical concepts and real-world applications.
Exactly. And remember, effective antitrust enforcement requires a combination of legal expertise, economic analysis, and investigative skills.
Well, we've certainly covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've explored a wide range of interview questions, delved into the nuances of competition policy, and even peeked into the future of this dynamic field.
It's been a fantastic journey. We've discussed everything from market definition to merger control to the challenges of regulating digital platforms. We've also talked about the importance of continuous learning, effective communication, and ethical conduct.
I feel like we've given our listeners a comprehensive toolkit to prepare for that competition policy officer interview and to excel in this exciting and challenging field.
Absolutely. Remember, preparation is key. The more you practice your answers, the more confident you'll feel going into that interview. And don't forget, RoleCatcher is a fantastic resource to help you refine your answers and showcase your best self.
So to our listener out there, we believe in you. Go out there, ace that interview, and make us proud. The future of fair competition is in your hands.
And remember, this is just the beginning of your journey. The world of competition policy is constantly evolving, so stay curious, keep learning, and never stop challenging yourself to make a positive impact on the marketplace.
On that inspiring note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Until next time, stay sharp, stay engaged, and keep diving deep.